Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Ken Rusk with me. Ken is the CEO of Rusk Industries, and he's also a author. In the book that he wrote is called Blue Collar Cash. And I think the point that I want to make before we jump into his story that you'll be able to extract is Ken has always been about figuring it out, doing it his way, and sometimes that has to be a contrarian way to what the general population says. So, Ken, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So, to start off, as a young man, you decide, you know what? Hey, I'd like to be able to earn some money, and you get into the ditch digging and construction world. So, talk a little bit about, being in your younger years and deciding, hey, it's time to get a job.
Yeah, it was interesting because my high school shared a fence with a industrial park. And every day after school, we'd cut through a well-worn hole in that fence. It had been there forever. And we would cut through this industrial park on our way over to the carryout where we would just hang out after school and try to figure life out,
Yeah.
So whenever I would walk through this industrial park, I would always see I would just feel this energy. There was always things buzzing around, people, contractors, guys doing this and moving that and building this and fixing that. And it just always intrigued me that there was this group effort, this energy that things were getting done. So, I was like anybody else. I was 15. I wanted to get my first used car. I wanted to buy my girlfriend pizza or go bowling with my buddies, whatever. So one day I knew somebody that worked there, and I walked in and I said, "Hey, what are we doing?" And they said, "Well, we're basically ditch diggers here. We fix old wet basements and that kind of thing." So I said, "Well, I think I'm qualified for that. I can pull that off." So yeah, I started digging ditches in the summertime when I was out of school, and when I was in school. During the wintertime, I would work in the office. So I kind of learned the front and the back of that. And that kind of propelled me to where I am today because I did that for 3 or 4 years. Now I'm 18. I have to decide, am I going to college? Am I not?
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to travel the Midwest and open up new branch offices. And it was cool because I got to kind of learn how to open a company on somebody else's dime with somebody else's risk.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 3 or 4 years, living out of a suitcase, got tired of that, and then moved to Toledo, Ohio. And we opened up our own office here and started with 6 people. We have nearly 200 now. So it's been a heck of a ride.
Absolutely. Now, to think back, 15 to 18 years old, you're working this job. There's something cool and proud to be said about having your own money so you can buy your own things and you can do unique opportunities. But there's also something to be said about learning work ethic, right? And, there's really no better way than either having a job, or sometimes it can be through athletics or, some extracurricular activity. But talk a bit about work ethic. Was that something that you had seen, exemplified from someone in your family or a family friend, or was that really something that you learned as you got the opportunity to start working yourself?
Well, that's a multi-layered question. I had 4 brothers, and when we were younger, we didn't have any money. So everything that we did, we had to make or build or create ourselves. So that was number one. Number two, I always felt like being in control of my day was more important than anything else. Like I wanted to control my input and my output. I wanted to control the quality of my work, not anybody else do that. I wanted to control, the feedback I got from my work and how long it took me to do something, or I wanted to control my day, my schedule, and my financial gains. So for me, it was pretty simple. I knew that there was power in the ability to control all that. And so for me, the harder I worked, the more I got. We had a pretty rewarding system where I worked.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this is great. I mean, I can figure out what my future is going to look like just by doing what I do for myself first and for the company second. And it worked out pretty well that way.
That's great. Now, as you mentioned, you're getting to this point in life, you're 18, it's kind of that decision, hey, do I start in the working world? Do I go to college? And you had already had some life experience, so you knew, hey, I enjoyed this type of work, or I enjoyed enough that I could see myself doing it. At the same token, certainly today, and once again, in your book, you talk about this a bit more, but I think there's always, people giving us feedback of, well, no, you should go to college, Ken, and you're sitting here saying, well, maybe I don't want to go to college. So talk about, making that decision for you in that time and what that looked like.
Well, back in my high school days, there was something that we had called shop class.
Yeah.
And I remember walking down the hallway and, there was this long glass window and you could look in there and you could see guys wiring an outlet, or you could see some gal doing someone's hair, or you could see someone building a table or welding or fixing a car. And that's where millions and millions of kids accidentally discovered things like carpentry, plumbing, electricians, and all that, welding, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that kind of got taken out of high school and they replaced those rooms with computers. I remember precisely the day they did that. And, not that we didn't need to learn computers, because we did, obviously, Phil, but
yeah, right.
why was it one or the other? I mean, why did we make that switch? Because now you've eliminated that accidental discovery.
Yeah.
And now everybody thinks, so I need to be a computer person, which means I need to be a college person. So all these schools went from prep for life to prep for college. And at the same time that happened, we moved from working with these two things to, working on a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
And instead of building a tree fort in your backyard, you built a city on Minecraft. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not that Minecraft is bad, but I mean, it's not the same experience as hammering a nail, right?
Right.
So when you combine those two things with the fact that colleges are really good at marketing themselves to everybody, and they're working through teachers and through counselors and through parents to almost shame people into saying it's college or else. And I got to tell you, Phil, that's never been true in the history of our economy.
Yeah.
It isn't true today. So we just have to be really careful that we don't get into this super imbalance of, the people that work in our economy to keep it going.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So as you've had a few years of working and you're going now full time with this company, like you said, you get this opportunity to kind of travel around the country and help open things up. So talk a little bit about making the transition from maybe day-to-day tasks and, doing the labor part versus maybe a little bit more on the management side of things and the new skill sets you're having to learn and develop there.
Well, a lot of it was trial by fire. Okay. I remember specifically, I was in Chicago and I used to have to go in and find an office space that had nothing but walls and doors, but it had a dirt floor and I had to build all that out. Now, I didn't do it myself. I hired people to do it. But it was interesting because there was nobody behind me saying, hey, put the door over there. Okay. Put the bathroom over there. I just had to come up with this idea. And again, trial by fire. I remember I'm working with a couple of huge union plumber guys and I'm trying to tell them what to do. And here I am, I'm 18 and a half years old and these guys are in their 40s and they're like, I'm 130 pounds and these guys are like huge. And I'm trying to tell them what to do. And they looked at me and they're like, who is this guy? Right.
Yeah.
So you do that a few times or enough times and you kind of figure out, well, hey, we're just all trying to make something happen here. So I think that was part of it. The other part was I really knew what I wanted out of the rewards for working that hard. And so if I could picture what I wanted my life to look like, and I did that very clearly, all the work, all the travel, all the time, all the hours went towards obtaining certain pieces and parts that I wanted in my life. And therefore I was completing the Ken Rusk puzzle, if you will, or my goal board. And it worked out pretty good.
Yeah. Now, thinking about the age part of it, one, you had to earn enough trust with whoever was running the company at the time to be the guy that they sent out to do that job. But two, then you had to earn the trust of the people that you were going to be kind of telling what to do. And talk about, gaining trust with someone, in general, but also at that young of an age. Like, what characteristics about Ken, were allowing you to get those opportunities at that young of an age?
Well, in my book, I write a lot about actually thinking you've done something. There's a specific chapter, and I can't remember who told me this story, but it went kind of like this. I never built the skyscraper before, but if I did, well, I approached everything like that. So
Yeah.
I would say, I never built that skyscraper before, but if I did, I probably would need some land. Okay. And then you ask your question again, I would probably need architect. And then you ask the question again, I would probably need a contractor. And the more you ask the question of yourself, the more you actually take yourself through the process of building that thing.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say it's fake it till you make it. It's more like experience it while you're experiencing it. Yeah. But it really does work because you can't walk into life and go, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I don't know how to do this. You can't freeze. You have to just assume you've done it before and kind of think, well, what would it be? What would happen? And then that kind of took me through a lot of those uncertain moments.
That's really good. Now, I can resonate with what you just said because I started my financial planning practice when I was 19. And, to your point, you're looking at people that are 40, 50 years old and they're looking at you saying, weren't you playing like high school basketball like 6 months ago? What are you telling me about my money?
Yeah.
And the thought that I always had though was, what are the unique things about my age that's actually in my benefit, right? So oftentimes we focus on, well, what can't I say about this or that because my age is against me? But what are the things that are beneficial to me, right? There's always a flip side to anything that has a negative. There's a pro to it if you really are willing to think about that.
Yeah, there was the gentleman that I used to work for had a sign on his desk and it said, "You create everything that happens." And that's good or bad, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, I just think that for me, looking back on those times, I knew that I had to do this. I knew there was no one that was going to bail me out. And so I just took advantage of the energy that I had, the enthusiasm that I had, the fact that I love to be humorous, and that kind of broke a lot of tense moments. You know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, you just have to keep looking at what the end game is and work your way from there back to now. Because I just interviewed a gentleman yesterday who runs 130-mile marathons, and I asked him, I said, well, how do you deal with like mile 87? And he said, well, I don't. I deal with 2 miles at a time, 3 miles at a time, and I break it up into little sections. So I think that's what people need to understand is that almost any goal that you have to drop the if and just make it a when.
Yeah.
Almost any goal. I mean, maybe I can't do it in a year, but I can sure as heck do it in 2 years or 3 years. So now I break it up into 156 weeks instead of 52. Yep. It's just that simple. So yeah, I think you can knock down almost anything if you just break it down into simple pieces. And that what that does is that builds confidence that you keep progressing along the way.
That's really good. I love it. Now, like you mentioned, after doing this and working for a company for a while, you decide, you know what, maybe I'd like to start my own business. And even though you've gained a lot of knowledge at this point, there's always that big risk factor of, oh crap, now I'm going to go do it for myself. That means there's zero guaranteed money. That means I have to pay other people to work for me. So talk about just having the confidence to take what you've learned in the company you've worked for and then decide to go open your own.
Well, obviously I had practiced a little bit with helping other people open their companies. So I kind of knew what the formula was. Yeah. There's obviously still some trepidation, and there's also the motivation. I remember that we had a loan for $50,000, and at the end of that loan was us driving back home to mom and dad. So that gave us a little timing. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you got 60 days to make this happen. But I think that's good, though. I think to have a little heat on you is good. But the other thing is this, there is such power in people. And it was really cool. I'll never forget this day when I was very young. I had a landscaping business that I just opened. Okay. And I loved landscaping, but I'll never forget. I had 2 guys working with me that I left on a job, and I was paying them $5 an hour. And I was charging $10 an hour for those 2 guys. And I was out gathering some materials for this job. And I thought, man, this is unbelievable. I have two guys there each making me $5 an hour right now. And they were happy to make the $5.
Right.
Okay. They were thrilled because I was paying them $1 more than they were working at their last job. So there was just this beautiful power in creating people and creating teams of people. And I learned a very important lesson, early on. And that is that, I don't know it all. I can't do it all. I'm one person. So drop the ego, drop the boss thing. Don't be this person who goes home and says, oh, I solved this problem and I fixed that problem. You can't get what you want for yourself or your company until everyone within it gets what they want first. And if you can think about it in those terms, you find some entrepreneurial employee thinking that way, surround yourself with those people, they will drive your company way further than you can ever drive it yourself. And then you share the rewards with everybody and it all works out.
So let's talk about ego for a minute, because how important, how critical of a thought. Now, something that can happen when it comes to ego is, one, sometimes we're too good to listen to other people. Two is, all of a sudden, I'm the owner of the company. I don't need to do those tasks, right? Talk a little bit about taking your ego out of it and how that can really fuel and propel the business forward.
Well, again, I look at it this way. So I can't work 90 hours a week. I mean, I can't do that. I can try, but I'm going to kill myself doing it. So, and I really didn't want to work that hard. So my goal was, and this is very controversial, so hang in there with me. My goal was to make myself almost irrelevant to the running of the company.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that so that I could kind of oversee everything and plug myself in wherever I wanted to without having a specific task that was tying me down. So I knew I had to be able to afford people to do that. Okay.
Yep.
So plus, I wanted to sneak away and have a golf lesson for a half an hour every now and again. Yeah. But the point is, I knew I needed a group of great people around me in order to make that happen. So I said, well, let's do this. The current level of our company is X amount of $1 million per year. If we get to Y or Z level, I'm going to share this much of that with you. And man, I got to tell you, Phil, it was like a gun went off. I mean, these guys were like, all right, get the heck out of my way. Let's go do this. And, sharing what you don't yet have is easy as can be. I mean, there's no easier thing than that. People, well, that's a lot of money. You're sharing this. And no, you're sharing what you don't even have yet. So, so let them run with it. Let them do it. Allow them to get their lives on track for themselves. Because if somebody says this, man, you know what? I can really get what I want for myself with and through this guy's company. Now you got something. Okay. Now you have something. And so surround yourself with as many of those people as you can, and you're going to have a really cool life that way.
I love that. Now, you hit the nail on the head with that comment, and it's easy to see why your company of 6 ends up progressing to 200. But the thing that's not easy to see is, how the heck do we go from 6 to 200? That's monumental and huge growth. Yeah. So talk a little bit about, maybe a couple of those first points where you really saw the growth phase of the business, and making some of the bigger leaps, and how you did that.
Well, what we found was we were hitting these levels, these plateaus. Like we would hit this level and stay there for a year. And then we'd hit this level and stay there for a year. And then we'd hit a little more. And I found out that we were actually limiting ourselves by what we thought was possible.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a scary thing, because here you are, you're doing this work and you're like, well, wait a minute, we did 5% more than last year or 10% more than last year. We're growing. It's okay. But yeah, again, surrounding yourself with people that say, well, wait, what about this, Ken? Or what if we did that? Or, you know what, I just thought of an idea. Let's make that happen. And then you're like, okay. And pretty soon you're jumping 30% and you're jumping 50%. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. So you just can't wait to create a bigger family at that point, right?
Yeah.
Just get some more people around you. And it really is amazing. I mean, I've got people that have been with me 35 years, 25 years, 20 years, 15 years. I have a whole bunch of people that have been here over a decade. And it's because they know that they are they're part of the whole piece. Yeah. They get to see beginning to end. They're not just a cog in the wheel and like, what am I even doing and how do I matter? they know right where they fit in and how it works. So the end of the year, in fact, it's Christmas time and I'm about to write some bonuses. So the end of the year is always pretty good.
Yeah. Now, I want to highlight that because I think there's certain industries where people feel a ton of fulfillment from the task that they're doing, right? Because it's really easy to see direct impact. It's really easy to see the smile on someone's face after this task is done for them. And then there's others where sometimes that's a little bit harder to see. So talk about, throughout your business, how you're helping, the people inside the business really realize and buy into the overall mission of what we're helping folks with.
Well, there's two ways. Number one, I think it's really important that you create a stand back moment. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, and I'll go back to my landscaping days, at the end of the day, I would look at these beautiful houses and I would see the 15 pine trees that I planted and the rocks and the garden and the water feature. And I would stand back and lean on my shovel and I would look at that and go, wow, I did that. That's amazing. It'll stand the test of time. Those trees will be here 100 years from now.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful. I created this beautiful thing. So I think no matter what your typical business is, you need to find a way to create and show everybody within it what the stand back moment is. What's that big picture? What does it look like? What are you doing? How are you helping customers or helping people? What are you building? What are you creating? So I think that's really important that you make everybody see that.
That's great.
I think the other thing is, when you have a company that builds results like that, one of the things that's incumbent upon all of us to do, I believe, is to give back. So I have a steady stream of things that we donate to every year. And when I say donate, I don't mean we just write a check to some place in Africa and we don't know where the heck it's going or where what's happening with it. Not that the charities are bad there. I'm just saying. So we try to focus a lot on local charities where we can see exactly where every dollar is going, and we can be involved with our time, our treasure, and our talents. So when you have a company that gets to jump in a van and go to Ronald McDonald House and build a meal for somebody, or you get to go to Make-A-Wish and you get to celebrate with the family that they're going to Disney World or whatever it might be, when you're that heavily involved in the process, it really makes you feel great as an employee because you're like, man, you know what? This is a cool place to work. They're doing things for the right reasons. And I couldn't donate this if it wasn't for this company, but I can get involved in it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that stuff where you show people overall how they affect the world. And yeah, you find a more cohesive group of people that way.
Absolutely. No, that's really good. Now, you mentioned earlier, as the business was growing, there was some steady growth, but then there was the opportunities in times of massive growth. And I think one of the toughest pieces of life is, how do I enjoy what's happening while not losing my motivation for getting to where I want to go, right? I think a lot of people, myself included, throwing myself under the bus, I fear sometimes enjoying the cool moments that happen in business or in life, because it's like, ooh, if I enjoy this too much, I might lose my motivation to get to the next mountaintop moment. But if I only am constantly focused on the next mountaintop moment and I don't appreciate anything that's currently happening, I'm going to be a very unfulfilled human being. So how for you in your life have you been able to balance those two pieces of the pie?
Well, there's a gentleman that I can't wait to talk to in a couple of weeks. His name is Steve Sims, and he wrote a book called Go for Stupid. And what he meant was, if you're looking to set a goal for yourself, set it like 3-4 times higher than you could ever imagine. Yeah. And just watch what happens. God forbid you fail at half of that. You're still way better than you started, right? Yeah. So I think for me, it's constantly surrounding myself with things that I would like to do. Go back to Scotland and play more golf, or build a new building for my company, which we're going to do next year. Or cool. We're constantly trying to create moments with our family, with experiences, with things that we've done, trips that we take, places that we've seen, and people that we've helped. So, I would always say that life is best when you're anticipating several things at the same time. We're all so good, Phil, at planning vacations. oh man, I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to sit on the sand. I'm going to have my lounge chair. I'm going to have my umbrella and my drink and my music. I'm going to have my suntan lotion and feel the breeze on my face. We all know how to do that. And we do it 3-4 months in advance. And it's like, man, I can't wait to go do that. Right.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we anticipate all aspects of our life that way?
Mm.
Because if you're chasing multiple things at the same time, 3 months, 6 months, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it's just a way better way to live, because you get out of bed and those things kind of drag you through the result. You're not pushing anything uphill anymore. You're kind of getting taken, they're pushing you along.
Yeah.
And bringing you forward. So, your mind is a powerful thing, man. And what it anticipates, it usually attracts itself to. So put a lot of things out there and you'll find it's a much better way to live.
I love it. Now, as the leader and founder of, Rusk Industries, how did you really start being good at delegating? I think that's oftentimes one of the toughest tasks of a leader, is having the trust in someone else to do the task. Because we oftentimes think we can do it the best. And so talk a little bit about, as you were growing, I'm sure this evolved a few different times through the course of hiring different folks.
Two things. If you're running a company, again, you can't be everything to everybody. You just can't. You have to drop that. Okay. And I guess I look at it this way. I would typically take a task and I would hand it to someone and I would say, I would like you to do this. And they would say, well, how do you want me to do it? And I would say, I have no idea. Now, I might have had an idea. Yep. Okay. But this is what I kind of think it needs to look like. So can you kind of run with that and let me know how it goes? And you will be shocked at how many times it comes back better than you thought it would, or better than you would have done it yourself. Well, there you go. Now you know what you've got there. Now, if somebody comes back with something that's half of what you would do, okay, you got that too. The ability to solve problems and to self-diagnose and to run with things and run with new challenges, that's where you find those entrepreneurial people I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you just have to kind of toss the line in the water and see what you get. But I just think it's really important to trust people, to let them know that they are trusted, and to expose their talents. Right person, right seat. You've heard that before.
Yeah.
And just let it go, because you will find that a lot of people will rise up to that occasion, and they'll impress you more than you think, and they'll do things better than you could even do yourselves.
Yes, I love it. Now, with that, one of the items that you've really embodied and incorporated in your business is the idea of a 5-star experience, right? And I think a lot of businesses say we aim to serve and give a 5-star experience, and yet you go have the experience and you go, this is just a slogan. This is not a practice. And, you've talked about, hey, we'll go to a job site, we'll make meals for people. So talk a little bit about where this idea came from and some of the unique and cool things you guys are doing.
Well, it's interesting, because in today's society, it used to be that you could put an ad in the paper and then the next day there'd be 10 people sitting in your foyer. Yeah. Well, now there's 2 and they're looking at you like, hey, dude, what's in it for me to work here? So for us, it's been about culture. I mean, we've had to work on, you got to remember what we do. Okay, Phil, we dig ditches, we use jackhammers, and we're in the mud and the concrete. We're doing some tough work. Right? You jack up a house, you rip out the basement, you put a new basement in, you set the house back down. It's tough. Yeah. So we've had to work on culture for a very long period of time. So now when we hear somebody say, man, I got to start working on culture with these people now, we're like, hey, we've been doing this forever because we were forced to. Right. So when you kind of tie that in, well, if I can make my employees' culture and experiences wonderful, that's going to translate into great experiences for my customers. So let's meld that together, because, the secret is, I want to make sure that I feed cheeseburgers to my guys in the front yard of our job, because it's fun and it's cool and they have a great time. So we have a mobile grill that drives around and does this. But it's also a chance for them to sit down with the homeowner. We'll feed the homeowner a cheeseburger if that's what they want. Yeah. And they're like, I mean, you can't believe how many times in February, the missus of the house will look out the window and go, honey, I think people are cooking in our front yard. And it's just a blow away experience. So
Yeah.
that's just one of the things that we do to try to get the homeowner to understand that we're going to be different than most companies that you deal with. And when we're done, we're going to want you to rate us honestly how you feel. And we get a heck of a lot of 5 stars. I mean, do we have other ones that, well, sure, but we get a lot of good stuff, and our reputation is pretty good because of it.
Yes, I love that. Now, in addition to, really creating a great culture inside of the overall organization, there's a lot of kind of one-on-one development that you guys focus on as well. So talk about, really buying into your people as much as your people are buying into you.
Well, I just said this about a half an hour ago, and that is to a new hire. And that, I look at it this way. How many times when you go to an interview, does the person who's asking you the question say, why are you here? Like, what are you doing here? How can we help you? What's your life look like? Why do you want a job? What's it going to do for you? How is it going to improve your life? People get kind of like, wow, he actually is asking questions like he cares about me. That's new and unusual. So for us, it's all about, again, surrounding ourselves with as many self-managing, self-directed, self-goal oriented people that we can find. So we have this giant glass, it's a black glass board in the hallway. And we have these markers that you'd use on, I don't know, like a restaurant menu, the neon colored markers.
Yeah.
And we have people write their goals on those boards for all to see. And then we have another board that has all the goals that have been accomplished and why. And the reason we do that is because once I teach you twice how to design a goal, how to break it down, how to get it into action, how to build it with certainty, and then how to share it with others so they can see it. Once you do that twice, I don't need to do that anymore. You now have become this person, this self-directed person, this, hey, Ken, get out of my way kind of person. Yeah. And we've got dozens of examples of that. And, again, how many people go to a company or maybe go to the bar with their buddies after work and say, these guys are pushing me harder towards my goals than I'm doing it. Yeah. And once they see the result of that, they're just a highly effective person. And again, you can't find enough of those out there. So
that's amazing. I love it. Now, earlier you mentioned, hey, we like to give back to different organizations and different charities, and we like to be affiliated with different folks philanthropically. And one of the organizations that you've really bought into and done that with is Make-A-Wish. So talk a little bit about, meeting Richard Davis and how that partnership and kind of relationship got formed.
Well, this is a kind of a strange story because, the very first Make-A-Wish person that we ever sponsored, we found out 6 months later that his sister was our babysitter.
Wow.
So we didn't even know that at the time. And one day she came over to the house to babysit and she said, are you guys sponsoring my brother for Make-A-Wish? And we're like, what's his name? And yeah, so that was a coincidence. Yeah. So since then, of the 12 or 13 that we've done over the last decade and a half, 4 of them have been connected to this building in some way. Wow. And it's amazing. Now, I have to say that all the ones that we've sponsored are still with us today, and that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. But I have to tell you, once again, we look for people, we support people who are supporting themselves. These are fighters, Phil. I mean, These people fight and they struggle and they persevere and they persist and they become resilient. And those are the kinds of qualities that, we should all have more of. So for us, it's a really easy thing to sponsor somebody like Make-A-Wish because that is the real deal. And you get to see everything that they go through and what the families go through because, in my own daughter suffered from having a bout with cancer and she's fine now. But what people don't understand about that is there is the patient and then there's the family.
Yeah.
And they're both patients, by the way.
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's like the whole thing. And it's such a great organization. I will never stop supporting them. I think they do just wonderful work.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So as you reflect back and just kind of think on your story and the growth of the business, are there certain inflection points that, were, once again, reflecting back on it, who knew moments for the business to grow, key hires or key jobs that ended up giving you enough steam to, continue on, or, hey, we were up against the wall on payroll, but luckily we had this, string of business come through the door and that propelled us forward another 6 months. But any of those types of moments that kind of come to mind?
Well, every time you have a moment where you're like, do we have any work for Monday? And it's Thursday. Yeah. That can actually harden you pretty good and get you to jump into action. But I just think this, one of my first stories in the book, Blue Collar Cash, is about a guy named Tim Despoth who works in our office and still works with me today. And we actually stumbled across this life coaching thing. I didn't go to school. I didn't go to college. I have no letters after my name. Okay. I'm the most involuntary life coach there ever was, but I love doing it. Okay. Yeah. So he and I sat down 35 years ago. He was 19 and I was probably 23. I don't know, something like that. And we were talking about what he wanted to do with his life. And I literally took out a piece of paper and some crayons and we started figuring out what he wanted. Okay. We were drawing Tim's world. And that set off in motion something to me that I will never forget because it works. And you build and create these amazing people through this process. And oh, by the way, he likes to give me credit for having, taken his life to a certain level. And I'm like, listen, man, I was there for like 4% of it. Okay. You did all the work. I just helped build the what if. Yeah. So if I could say something to anybody out there, it would be take somebody in your organization, set them down, have them draw what they want their life to look like. What are your hobbies? What are your sports? What are your health moments? What are your charity moments? What kind of house you want to live in? What kind of vehicles do you want to drive? What kind of pets do you want to own? Okay. Yeah. Dog, a cat. And if so, what color, what would you name it? Get that specific with somebody and just watch them take off. And then you're going to want to do that over and over and over again.
That's so good. Yeah. And there's so much power in having someone help you cast a vision, but also maybe even giving you insight and seeing something in yourself before you can see what's possible for you.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you're going to know real quick. Okay. Because one of the things that you'll find is that some people, they have a very clear vision of what they want and they can draw it and build it and design it with you perfectly. Mm-hmm. And the 5 steps of that are in the book. But there's other people who will think that they want something. And then over the next week or 2 or 3, that begins to fade, or the mechanism isn't quite working, or the goal isn't in play. So that there's some soul searching there. Okay. Yeah. Is that something that you really wanted? Is that something that woke you up? Is that you woke you up thinking about? Because it might not be. So let's pick something else. And that's okay if that happens, because you're learning this together with them. Yes. So yeah, I think that's a really important point.
Yeah. Well, Ken, as you continue to, run the ship and grow the business, what are you focused on next?
We're just focused on growth. There's a couple of things that I want to do. I want to get the employees to own the company a little bit. So I'm going to work through a process of that. We're kind of finding our way through that. Where I'm so good, Phil, at picking buildings, okay, and how big they should be, that I'm on my 5th one. That's how great I am at figuring out how big the building. Smaller, bigger, and that's a good thing. But I probably should get good at it and build a big one and be done with it. So yeah, we're gonna build a new headquarters next year. Cool. And we're still doing a lot of the things that this company has allowed me to invest in other things and enjoy other interests. So there's a lot of other things that I have my toe in the water on, and it's going to be good. It'll be an interesting next 5 to 10 years. That's for sure.
You bet. Well, Ken, I want to say thanks so much for being on today and sharing your story and just, the pivotal moments that have led to where you're at. And, it's fun to see all the amazing things you've done and all the amazing things you will do. And can't wait to just follow your story. And probably 3 years from now, we'll have to have this conversation when instead of having 200, we've got 400 employees and we got to talk about how the heck we got there.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things I want to tell you, if you don't mind, is so this course, when I wrote this book, Blue Collar Cash, I didn't want it to be something that was just a trophy that you read and you put up on the shelf and look at me, I read this book. So I built a course that goes along with it. And the course can truly teach you and or your staff how to do the things that I just talked about with you today.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of giving back, which I do a lot, if you buy this book and this course, I will donate a book and a course to anyone you want. And the sum total of this thing is $129. You get a $25 book with it. I've seen courses for thousands of, no, I don't want to do that. This is about giving back. So just know that if you get involved in this course, I will also make sure that someone else that you love will get it for free. And you can find all that at kenrusk.com.
KenRusk.com. And we'll put that in the show notes. That's awesome. Well, Ken, thanks again so much, my man. And we look forward to following up.
Yeah, I love to talk with you again for sure. Thank you, Phil.